Hi, hi. Recommend getting your heart templed onto anyone. Yeah. Hi. Recommend walking around naked in your living room. Yeah. Swallow it down. What a jagged little pill. Feels so good, swimming in your stomach. Wait until the dust settles. You live, you learn. You love, you learn. You cry, you learn. You lose, you learn. You bleed, you learn. You scream, you learn. Recommend biting off more than you can chew. I certainly do. I recommend sticking your foot in your mouth at any time. Feel free, throw it down. Caution blocks you from the wind. Hold it up to the rays. You wait and see when the smoke clears. You live, you learn. You love, you learn. You cry, you learn. You lose, you learn. You bleed, you learn. You scream, you learn. Wear it out the way a 3-year-old would do. Melt it down, you're gonna have to eventually anyway. The fire trucks are coming up around the bend. You live, you learn. You love, you learn. You cry, you learn. You lose, you learn. You bleed, you learn. You scream, you learn. You grieve, you learn. You choke, you learn. You laugh, you learn. You choose, you learn. You pray, you learn. You ask, you learn. You live, you learn.
Good morning. We're the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Elkhart, a welcoming community encouraging religious freedom, nurturing individual spiritual and ethical growth, celebrating diversity, and promoting a just and sustainable world. My name is Ken Claiborne, and I'm a member of the board of this congregation. We'd like to welcome you all to our virtual service this morning and thank you for joining us.
Okay. We ring the gong 3 times, once for those who came before us and made a place for us. Once for those who are here now. And once for those who will come after and build on the dream. Hear these words of Molly Brewer. My beloved people, I cannot pretend, and so I will not tell you that everything is okay right now, that there is no reason to be angry, that you must be optimistic or at peace. I cannot pretend these things, and so I won't tell them to you. But now the chalice is lit, and so I will ask in this moment is that we remember the words of Rebecca Parker. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all. By the light of our chalice, let us rest in this love. Okay.
Good morning, everybody. I'm here today to share some reflections on learning, education, and schools. And those of you that know a little bit about me, Carl Russ, by the way, is my name. I've been in schools for a long time. Not only was I in school when I was a younger person, graduated from high school, went on to college, then took a break, worked in the different businesses for a few years, and then went back to school again to be a teacher. And then I spent the next 30 years in schools, and I still love schools. I love kids and I love schools. But there's a few things I've figured out over the years I'm going to share with you a little bit, and maybe just ask you to reflect and ask some questions of yourself and see what you think. What is learning? How's related education in schools? So the first thing we are going to think about is, what is learning? So I'm going to give you a little bit of a pause to think about that. And I might get the guitar out and play a little song to give you some time to think about what is learning. Okay, I'll be back in a minute. Okay, here's the song. Give you a minute to think about what you think learning is. What is learning? Where is learning? How does learning happen anyway? What is learning? Where is learning? Where does learning lie? Where does learning lie? Is your brain like a cup to be filled, or a beautiful flower growing in the sun? Or is your brain like a muscle to be exercised? Where does learning lie? Where does learning lie? What is learning? Where is learning? How does learning happen anyway? What is learning? Where is learning? Where does learning lie? Where does learning lie? Does learning come from curiosity and excitement, or from lectures, books, and tests? Can you put real learning down on a paper? Where does learning lie? Where does learning lie? What is learning? Where is learning? How does learning happen anyway? What is learning? Where is learning? Where does learning lie? Where does learning lie? Does real learning involve your heart and soul? Or is it only in your mind? Can you learn by serving your community? Where does learning lie? Where does learning lie? Okay, so we're going to talk about learning today in schools. And as you know, I've spent a lot of my life in school, and so I have some ideas, but I really want to kind of get you to think about your ideas instead of me just telling you what I think. And I know for some of us, not for me, but for some of you, it's been a while since you've been in school. So, but think back to when you were in school, and what kind of things do you remember about school? And also, I want you to think about the last time you learned something. What was it that you learned? Where did you learn it? How did you learn it? And whose idea was it to learn that thing? So we'll be coming back to that in a minute. But I want you to think about what learning is. So I'm going to give you some examples of some different analogies that you can use to think about learning, and then think about what you believe learning is. Okay, one theory of learning could be that here's the learner, that they're an empty vessel, and so it's my job as the teacher to give them knowledge, which is going to be symbolized by our garden hose here. And so I'm going to fill them up with knowledge, and then they're full up, and then maybe when I give them a test, they dribble some of it back out, and I have to put some more in there. But you can see there's a problem with this analogy. It's what happens when you full up, and I keep putting more and more knowledge in there, it just keeps flooding over. So maybe not the best analogy for learning. So let's look at something different. Maybe learning is like growing a plant. Like maybe the brain or the knowledge that you gain is like a plant, and it's growing, it's getting sunlight, it's getting water, it's getting nutrients from the soil, and the plant is growing. And some reason to kind of think this is not a bad idea, because actually in your brain you have some things called dendrites, which when you learn something new, you actually grow a new dendrite, which is almost like a little tiny broccoli or cauliflower, a little shape like that in your brain. So of course we have wildflowers too, and they don't take a lot of care, they just kind of grow. So maybe the brain is like a plant. We'll look at some other ideas here. Another way you might think about the brain is maybe the brain is like a muscle. And you get, the muscle gets stronger and more efficient if you exercise it. So maybe if the brain is like a muscle, when we think and talk and argue and debate, we're actually exercising. When we talk, especially, or when we're doing some kind of mathematical thinking, whatever kind of thinking we're doing, we're actually building up our brain muscle. That's another way to think of the brain. So take a couple minutes and think about which idea you think is the best one for what a brain is and how it works. And then we're going to talk a little bit about learning environments. So depending on which one of those models you believe is going to determine what kind of learning environment that you design. So if you think that this cup, the filling up the jar is the best model, then you have a conventional classroom where people sit, listen, take notes, take tests, do homework. If you think the brain is more like a plant, then you see how the classroom might look a little different, that you might have maybe areas for different people to be, and you would try to give everybody what they needed. And then of course if you think the brain is a muscle, then you would design more like a gymnasium type thing, where you'd exercise your brain in all different kinds of ways. So the next thing we're going to look at is learning environments, and here's some examples. So one analogy for a learning environment would be like your lawn. And your lawn, for the most part, gets the same thing at the same time. So all the little blades of grass and all the little dandelions get mowed over to roughly about the same height. They get the same amount of rainfall, they get the same amount of sunshine, they get the same soil. So this is kind of like your conventional school, because in the conventional school, everybody gets the same thing at the same time. You have grade levels, you divide it up by ages. The interesting thing to me is if you look closely at my lawn, I don't know about your lawn might be in better shape than my lawn. But I've got these little guys, these little dandelions here, which are different from the grass, and some people spend a lot of money to get rid of those. They call them weeds. And also the little purple guys are, to some people, are weeds. But so this is one way to think of learning environment, is everybody gets the same thing at the same time, whether you're a dandelion, a purple flower, clover or grass. You get mowed and you get the same exact sunshine and everything. Another analogy for a learning environment could be a workshop, which mine's messy right now. My garage workbench is a mess. But normally I have all my tools in a certain place and I can tinker with things or fix things. And some people think of education as a process of kind of tinkering with a person and building, oh, I don't like this part, let's remove that. Now, oh, this is a pretty cool thing, so let's enhance that part. So another way to think of a learning environment would be a workshop where little kids get worked on. Kind of weird, huh? Maybe not the best. Another kind of learning environment is a wilderness. So this could be like a forest school or a free democratic school. This is where everybody kind of makes decisions about what is good for them. We have all these different plants, different heights. We have trees, we have, stuff on the ground. We've got bushes, we've got all different kinds of things. And nobody comes in here and mows or tells anybody what they should be doing. They do it. I might come in and pull some poison ivy, or if I find honeysuckle or whatever, I might pull that. But for the most part, it's left to go the way it decides it wants to go. Now, that's not to say that you have to have school outside in the wilderness. Also, some people do that. It just means this is an analogy, folks. So, would a good learning environment be like a wild place? Something to think about. Another analogy for a learning environment could be like a garden, and you would try to get each plant exactly what it needed to grow. So you could think of a learning environment, a school or at home or anywhere, as a garden where you got your little plants growing and you try to take care of them, nurture them. You're protecting them from the rabbits and the other predators. You've got a shelter, you've got a fence. So it's another way to think of a learning environment. So, giving you some examples, what do you think which one would you like? Which learning environment would you like? A nice, neat, orderly classroom like the lawn where everything's chopped off, or the plants that grow, or the wild area, or the garden area that's a little protected? So what's your ideas on that? I'd be interested to hear what you think is the most rich learning environment for you. Think about that. Okay, so now we need to stretch our minds a little bit, because when we talk about learning environments, like we were talking about the garden, the lawn, the wilderness, the workshop, that doesn't mean that we necessarily would have kids in those actual spaces, but it's an analogy or a model to think about. So if our school and our community believed that the best learning environment was a well cared for lawn, then that would result in certain kinds of things happening at school. And that's kind of the analogy that a lot of schools are based on. Everybody gets the same thing at the same time. You get mowed across. So, of course, that causes difficulty, because if I'm a big, tall tree sapling and you're going to come along with your mower and mow me down, that's not going to be good for me. If I'm a little short wild strawberry or a clover, go ahead and mow. Doesn't matter to me because I'm down here. So you can see some of the limitations of the current system are that it tries to say that there's one thing for everyone. And we know in our hearts and guts that's not right. If you've ever watched a kid, or if you've had kids or had kids of different ages, if you've had more than one, you know they're all different. Every kid is a unique little genius. They all have their special talents, and they have the things that they're good at, and there's other things they're not good at. But so one size fits all is not the best approach. So how about some of the other analogies? So I don't know if they resonated with you or not, but the wilderness one is interesting. And that doesn't mean we take kids out in the woods, although we could take kids out in the woods. That would be okay. And in some places, they have forest schools, they have nature schools, where kids are outdoors all the time. But it's more to say, do you kind of let the learner pick and choose the things that they're interested in? So even if you have a school building, are kids free to come and go as they please? Are they able to go to the library and check out books when they want to? Are they able to go to the science lab and do a science experiment when they want to? Or is it, and there's a few schools like that, you might be surprised to learn. There's Sudbury Valley School in Massachusetts, there's Summerhill School in England, and there's a Sudbury Valley School in Chicago. They're spread out all over the place, and they are somewhat, not exactly wildernesses because they have lots of rules and regulations, but the rules and regulations have been decided upon by the younger people in conjunction with the older people. So I don't know if that one resonates with you, if you like the idea of a garden, because in a garden, at least you can have different kinds of plants. You have a place for the flowers, and you have a place for the vegetables, and you can have corn, and you can have beans. You have all different kinds of plants. So maybe that's really an interesting model for you. The workshop model has some connections to conventional schooling, because sometimes when we're looking at, especially at individual kids that aren't fitting in or aren't making it in the system, sometimes we want to tinker with them, and we want to say, okay, let's give them this reward. If they'll stay in their seat for 80% of the time, they get a toy, or they get something, they get a reward. They get a nice note home or a nice phone call or whatever. And so that, in that way, sometimes it's kind of like a workshop, because we're like tinkering, trying to fix kids. Get both my fingers in there. So let's see, which one did I forget? The lawn, the garden, the wilderness, the workshop. And there may be others. You may think of a different learning environment analogy. But based on what you believe about learning should kind of determine your environment that you're going to create. So if you believe that learning is something that originates inside a person, is based on their interests and the things that they like to do, then you may tend more towards a garden analogy, or if you're really brave, a wilderness analogy. If you think learning comes from outside and it's something that we do to people, then you may like the lawn analogy or the workshop analogy. So think about that. The other thing that I know that a lot of you have not spent much time recently in school, but maybe you have children or grandchildren or great-grandchildren or neighbors or nieces and nephews that are in conventional school. So you can talk to them and say, what's it like? What do you like about school, and what is it that you don't like? And one interesting thing that you could ask younger people is, if you could change anything about your school, what would you change? And just see what they have to say. Hello, everybody. I want to talk for a minute about real and fake learning and what's the difference. So to me, real learning is when you're interested in something and you go out and find out about it, and you're very motivated for a number of reasons, maybe, to learn about something. You really want to learn it, or you need to learn it. It may be a skill you need for your job. It may be just something that you're very, very interested in. On the other hand, what I call fake learning is when I am in a class where I don't want to be, and I'm giving information, I'm getting information I'm not interested in, and I'm taking a test and putting that information back on paper when I didn't want to learn it in the first place. That's fake learning because it's temporary. I learned it long enough to take the test or write the report, and then I'm done with it and I don't remember it anymore. So that's the difference between real and fake learning to me. Okay, so we've talked about what is learning. We've talked about my ideas about real and fake learning. We've talked about learning environments, and you may be saying, this is all very nice and interesting, but what has it got to do with me because I don't have kids in school, or I'm not a teacher. But I would say it's all our responsibility to help improve our schools. And one of the kind of sad things about school for a lot of us, when we reach the age of 18 or 21 or whatever age it is, and we're finished, we think we're finished with school, and we go out in the world and do our thing, we kind of just have left that behind us, like, that's not part of me anymore. I'm not in school. Some of us become teachers or administrators and we get stuck in school, or paraprofessionals. We're not stuck, but we're in school for longer. But you might say, what does this got to do with me? Why? Because school is one of the things, not totally responsible, but one of the things supposed to be preparing people to be productive citizens. And one thing about school is, do we want schools to be producing responsible citizens that vote and get involved in government and politics and social movements? Do we want people to come out of schools asking questions and digging for information? Or do we want people to be coming out of school not questioning authority, not knowing a lot about real life, not knowing or not having practiced making decisions, not have had a voice in their lives since they were very little? So we, in school, we somewhat try to regulate people and say, sit down, be quiet, do your work, don't talk, don't ask questions, don't question authority, do what you're told, do it now, do it quickly. And then they turn 18, and we dump them into college and say, okay, now you're an adult, start making decisions. And they don't have any experience or practice in doing that. They've never been a part of a democratic community. They've never had to make a group decision. They've never had to collaborate or compromise or be part of a team, maybe in athletics. And they've had some experience with some of this, but do you kind of see what I'm saying? That what do we want schools to do? What kind of people do we want schools to be producing? And for the sake of our children and grandchildren, the 21st century is a very different place from the 19th century. But the conventional schooling that we give people is very similar to what they got in the 19th century. But society's changed. And some people would argue that our compulsory public education system was, and there's some evidence if you want to go look for it, was designed to produce compliant, complacent factory workers that did not question authority and were able to follow orders quickly and follow a schedule, not questioning authority. And so that's, if you think about it, that's kind of what they're designed for. Sit down, be quiet. You have to ask to use the restroom. You have to ask to get a drink of water. You're not free to express yourself. If you disagree, it depends on your teacher. You may have a very kind, open teacher who welcomes debate and disagreement, but a lot of cases, kids get in trouble. They get suspended. They get sent to the office because they're arguing, with authority. So what do we want our schools to be? And what can we do about it? So if you have kids in school, then you can work with those kids. And I'm going to give you a website to go to if you're interested. Unschoolingschool.com is a place you can go, give you lots of information about how you can change your public school in the way you want it to change. If you're a community member, that's also a resource. Whether you're a grandparent, parent, community member, the other thing that you can do is get involved with your school. Go over there, wherever your neighborhood school is, go visit it. Maybe not right now during COVID, but maybe next year. Call the principal, say, I'd like to come over for a visit. I live in the neighborhood. My taxes support your school. I want to see what's going on. And this is going to sound self-serving, but I wrote a book, Get Out of the Way and Let Kids Learn, that has a lot of my opinions about school in it. You could buy some of these and give them to the staff at your local school. And if you don't want to buy them, they're on Amazon, or you can get them from me for cheaper. But if you don't want to buy them, I'll give you copies. I didn't write the book to make money. I wrote the book to help kids and educators. Go to your school and get involved with it. Have them invite me over for let me give them a talk. Or if you belong to a service club or a group, any kind of group, I'd be glad to come in and talk about education. We're all responsible to change schools. And if you are one of the people that when you went through my mental exercises earlier, if you think it should be a lawn or a workshop and you're happy with people coming out of school not being decision makers, creative problem solvers, if you're okay with that, then you shouldn't do anything, I guess. But if you think that school should be different, then let's see if we can't get together and change school, and get it to reflect more what we believe about what real learning is. So I hope this has been interesting and stimulating, and I'm asking you to write letters to the editor, visit your local school, find out what's going on, prove me wrong. Say, hey, Carl, I found a school that is absolutely doing the things that you say they should do, and I will be overjoyed to hear that. So I guess that's all for me for today. I'd be happy to hear comments or questions at any time. So thank you very much for taking the time to listen, and I hope you have a great rest of your day and great week.